So, ladies and gentlemen, hello. We are starting good. So, welcome everybody to our Martin Center lunchtime discussion. Also, online viewers, welcome, which we have plenty. In this midday discussion, we are going to discuss about political parties, planning the after party, the future of European political parties. A little bit kind of the main questions: where do the political parties go at the moment, and what are the developments? So first of all, why are we discussing about future of political parties? One could say that after Second World War, for 2-3 decades, or even maybe more, the political landscape, party political landscape, was relatively stable. Of course, we had the Cold War of it and its implications. We had also radicalization in various countries, even terrorist attacks. But if you look at the political parties, it was relatively stable. Of course, during the decades, you could see the trend that the political parties were losing a little bit the support, and also the voters' activity went down. But more or less, in many countries, it was like a business as usual. Until then, maybe end of the 90s, when the societal and more economic development start to show some signs. In 90s, we had in various countries financial crisis. The implications were felt also in the political landscape and also in party political landscape. The populism, which was not so strong before, more in Latin America, but that trend also was appearing in Europe. Then 2007, 2008, we had the financial crisis here in Europe. And from that point on, the situation started to develop. First of all, the populist parties, lot of discussion focused on the poor parties in right, but also, of course, in the left. And more or less 10, 12, 13 years ago, there was another trend, which is the digitalization, the rise of the internet. So we had these two trends. We had the rise of the populist parties, and also this discussion about what will be the future of political parties, but not only future of democracy. If you remember, there was a lot of discussion. Even we had the Pirate Party, we had some attempts to have a political party solely in the internet, and many of those parties, new parties, were claiming that they are presenting something totally new, that the political parties are dead. So in this discussion, I would say there's two aspects. First aspect is, the change in the political landscape, the fragmentation and polarization of politics, and what its implication in political parties. And our panelists will discuss about that. So basically, to simplify, in the beginning, like analytically, we were discussing political parties as in a center-right axle, but then came the new view of seeing the party political landscape, which is conservative versus liberal, and then also this globalization versus nationalism. And of course, this different kind of different clustering was felt also in the political parties, existing political parties also, and especially in the mainstream parties, both in the socialist parties, the big ones, and EPP mainstream parties. What happened that before, for decades, the big parties were considering that the different segments they had within the parties was something which gave them strength and legitimacy, but more and more it became a challenge. So that's the one aspect. But the second aspect, which I will mention, is the whole: how do individuals and citizens relate to the political parties? How does the fact that people communicate differently, meaning digitalization, and have different commitment span vis-a-vis organization, how does it impact political parties? And on this second aspect, actually, Martin Center, we did 6-7 years ago, actually study with EPP political parties. It was not hugely in-depth, but we had maybe 20, 30 interviews. And it was about party political reforms, and we were advising EPP parties on how to conduct that. But have to be honest, I remember when we did that study, I had huge expectations that we are going to find the silver bullet. And to be honest, things didn't go that way. Actually, there was 3 conclusions. One, which was no-brainer, that for the political parties, then it was increasingly important to be a mechanism to find the lead politician. So very clearly, how the politics had changed, it was more and more important for the party organization to find the right leader with the charisma and message. That became that has always been in politics, but it seemed that in recent years that was more important. And the second aspect was that in that time, 7-8 years ago, there was this. Many times political parties try to operate like a political movement. What do I mean? For example, you have a party and it has a spin-off, like a campaign or platform. For example, the political party was running a campaign, and before the campaign started, it created this kind of non-partisan platform to discuss about the program. Actually, those were hugely successful. But for me and for us, I think it was a little bit disappointing, the results, because we expected something groundbreaking. But then came 2 events after that. First of all, Macron. We are going to speak about that today. So Macron's victory from somebody who is analyzing party politics, the fact that he won the presidential elections, what was not the most revolutionary thing. What was the most revolutionary thing? For example, for me, was the fact that he was able to win the parliamentary elections after. Because, for example, France, it's very centralized political system, also much relates to personalities, but nevertheless, the regional politics plays a huge role. So there you had the guy who came out of thin air and was able to wipe out the whole opposition. So for us, it also meant that now we are in the situation where in certain conditions and situations, political parties do not actually matter in certain conditions, which was quite a scary perspective. The other event when happened, and it related to social movement, it's the victory of Sebastian Kurz, who managed to then unite the FAP, the Austrian People's Party, to its movement. But that's another story. So that is the landscape. And now, and I conclude, maybe 2-3 observations. So for the discussion, why have political parties nevertheless survived and remained? I'm sure that there are many reasons, but I would say that at least one reason is that the political parties they have survived because the political system essentially has not changed. The political system, parliament, government, it's basically the same story than 350 years ago. And it is based on political parties. And if that mechanism is not there, the system becomes unstable. And we had various intents, like many in Europe. I think Cinque Stelle in Italy is the best example, who very clearly say that we are going to replace political parties, but in reality what happened is that Cinque Stelle became more or less as a political party. So that's the one. And I would, as a conclusion now today, what times we are living, we are seeing that the socialist parties, which were 10-15 years in crisis, have now came back in many countries, and also EPP mainstream parties. We have election in Sweden, election in Finland, election in Spain, an upcoming election in Spain. Of course, election in Greece is all indication. And of course, we can discuss why those results are there. Maybe one reason is that those new parties and new movements have really not managed to fully deliver as they promised from the beginning. But with this, we have an outstanding panel, and I would give the floor to Peter Heffele, who will introduce the speakers and launches us to the debate. So thank you very much for coming.
Tommy, thank you very much for your kind words of introduction. Ladies and gentlemen, a warm welcome also from my part, also to those who are joining us online. You have mentioned, Tommy, the keywords, movements, virtual parties, that deaths live longer, at least political parties, and indeed, against all these doomsdays, saying they're still the dominant factors in our political and Western democracies. So enough reasons to dig a bit deeper into the changes, the challenges, and the new ways, and hopefully into a future of political parties in Europe. And I will do this with my distinguished experts here on our panel. They are all experts in party politics and covering a wide range of experience in practical life, but also in research on party politics. They come from different regions in Europe, from the Nordic countries, from Spain, from the Mediterranean area, and they come from different parties, different levels of politics. So I hope we can give you a quite wide range of different experiences. So let me start with my dear colleague Heidi from Norway. She is an acting member of the Norwegian Parliament for the third time, and she is with the Høyre Party. That's one of our member parties of the EPP. You're an expert in budget and finance. You're in the Standing Committee currently, but also have a history in social and labor affairs and gender equality. But you have a second life before or in parallel, I would say, because you have been in business, in marketing, in sales. And I think the most important thing for you is that you became one of the most influential political bloggers in your home country, and you're still very present in television and radio and internet. So the media world is also with you. I go further to my dear colleague from Spain, Elisa. You're currently the youngest member in the Asamblea Regional de Madrid. That's the regional parliament. So we have not only the national parliament. I'm very delighted to have the other political levels as well. You're with our Partido Popular, and the Spanish elections had already been mentioned. That is one of the big events we are currently waiting for. You had been the face, I would say, of your party in Madrid. At least you're very present as well in TikTok and all these new media, and the young generation and family youth issues are of your major interest here. Thibaut, great to have you here. You are with one of our partners, the International Republican Institute. It's one of the largest American political foundation, I would say. You're currently based as a senior advisor on party politics in Rome, but you have a long experience also back in your home country, France, where you, under Sarkozy in 25-27, had been instrumental in the election campaign and know about a lot of these issues. And you studied in the United Kingdom, so the British conservatism, British party system is also very much up with you. So I hope we can cover quite a wide range of different issues, and let's see what this will tell us about the future of political parties. Elisa, let me please start with you. There's one common issue we have always discussed. That's the generational issue, and I think you can sing a lot of stories. Aging memberships, outdated ways of communication, lack of inspiring role models, I would say, is something which parties are haunted. So you're, as I mentioned, on the youngest deputado, Tada, in the Madrid Assembly. Tell us a bit about your experiences, how you've grown up into the system, or what the system did to you.
So first of all, good morning to everyone. It's a pleasure to be here with all of you. I hope this is for your interest. I won't only talk about my perspective or my experience, because my experience, it's not so big. I've only been a member of the parliament for 2 years. It's true that we had the elections on the 28th of May with a really big majority in Madrid and also in many other regions of Spain. So we are very proud of it, because we are fighting the socialism, which is a lack in our country, at least. In our country it is, because Socialist Party, it's not socialism anymore. It's a radical left party, at least in our country. So I want to thank Peter, Tommy, and the Martin Center for having us here today. And you mentioned, Peter, 3 main problems that we face in politics in order to attract or to engage the younger generations. But I think there's one which is so important, which is reality. Sometimes when we are in politics, we don't talk about the reality the citizens are facing. We talk about major problems, but we don't talk about the problems who are facing the families, who are facing the younger generations. So it makes a big gap between what is happening on the streets and what is happening on the parliament. And I think that's something we need to face on if we are talking properly to the people, if we are asking them properly to the things to do, and if we are explaining ourselves in a proper way. Because sometimes when we talk about politics, we're in the parliament, we are talking to other politicians, but the videos goes to the citizens, and they don't understand, which I understand. Because we talk about many technicism, we talk about many big problems, let's say it that way, economical problems, difficult situations, but we are not translating that into the reality of the problems of the citizens or the younger generations. Like, for example, we have the same salary, but we cannot buy the same food in the supermarket than last year, for example. But we are not saying like that. We're talking about inflation, which is good, but people don't understand what inflation is. They understand they earn like 2,000 euros per month, and they cannot afford the same. So I think we need to translate. I think we need to make politics easier to the people, because the citizens we have many problems, and we don't have enough time to listen to everything politicians say, because we don't care. So if I don't care, people don't care, so anyone cares. So we need to think in that, because then I think politics will become more attractive when you make it like easy breezy to the people. That's one point. And the second thing I want to say, like, for example, here in Madrid, we are facing the situation that Podemos disappeared in our parliament. If you don't know Podemos, it's like the radical left we had in our country. And, well, right now we have other radical lefts, but we have one less. So at least it's something. And they are talking about, for example, letting people like invade your home, the private property, and the illegal occupation to be legal. And that's something that is transcending a lot into the people, a lot into the younger generations, because they cannot afford, for example, a home. So they know how to push the message to the younger generation. So we need to maybe think a bit more in marketing when we talk with the people, when we go to socials, when we do videos, when we try to do our own interventions in the parliament. Are we really talking and thinking in something attractive or not? I think that's important. And also because what happened in Spain right now, the 20th of May, with that absolute majority, it's that we treated people as adults, as individuals. And that's so important. I think people are so tired of being treated as kids that they don't know and they have no clue of what are they doing. I talked about this with Peter the last time we met in München. And I think that what we need to do from the right parties is to really promote freedom. And we need to promote the individuals. And we need to think that the people, it's really aiming to that. Because if we don't let people think by themselves, to choose by themselves, we're doing exactly the same as socialism does, which is direct the life of the people the way they want to. So I think it's so important to run that. Also on the campaigns about the communication stuff. And so if it gets bored to you, so do it for the people. If you get bored with your own video, people will get bored too. So if you don't like your video, if you don't like the way it's like jumping on socials, why do you do that kind of video? Because of the establishment of your own political party, because they say you have to be like super polite, super quiet, super... I think we need to innovate. I think we need to change a bit the ways, not breaking the principles of our parties, but yes, we need to move and be a bit different and less, let's say, like having that corset every single time we go and talk on media, we go and talk to video, because what the younger generations, they want is reality. They want to feel that people is true and the politician, it's a real person which feels and which really have like they matter for their problems. So if you're not human because you're like always super perfect, it's impossible. So I think we need to work on that. I think we need to be more flexible. I think we need, in our own way, every single one, of course, but we need to create something different. We need to become more attractive. And if we become more attractive to us, we'll become more attractive to the people and to the younger generations. But we need to communicate easily. We need to be like more, let's say, provocative on the socials. We need to work on that. We need to work on TikTok, because TikTok allows you a movement that maybe YouTube don't allows you, that maybe television don't allows you. So you have to know where you are at and where you are impulsing that message. And you have to talk with the reality. So with all those three little things, which are big, it might change a lot.
So at least in your case, the cookbook and the receipts worked very well. But Hilde, we stay with this issue of communication, because you lived in both worlds, in politics and media and marketing. Media, the changing media environment has often been mentioned that one of the reasons of polarization, of not being able to follow long-term projects because you are subdued to these rhythms you describe being present. How do you, and you have a long history in party politics as well, how did political parties, maybe your own party, cope with these challenges? What could we learn over the last 2 decades, say?
Well, I think you're pointing out some very interesting issues here, but I think it's also very typical for politicians to point at media and say that you are the problem and you are causing the polarization, while I think it's actually a symbiosis between politics and media. So politicians want more attention and are acting accordingly. And sometimes also when you have problems, like Elisa was talking about as well, if we're the mainstream parties, the old parties are not good enough at addressing people's actually problems, or worst case scenarios, not even acknowledge them, then we see that problems that are not solved in people's minds gives way to populism. And then we blame the media for having the populists on their screens. But it's actually a part of our responsibility as mature political parties to be able to tap into what people care about in their daily lives and address them. And this is, we live kind of in a perfect storm. We live in the aftermath of the fall of the Soviet. I know that's 30 years ago, but it's still defining European policies. We live in the aftermath of the China joining the World Trade Organization, the extension of the EU. So a lot of things that has to do with globalization, world trade, that are affecting people's lives. Their work has been outsourced to other countries, to China. Their economy are suffering because of some of this. It's even though it has benefited our economies, some people has fallen behind, and not even acknowledging those problems, because we are pro-globalization, at least as center-right parties. We are pro-free trade. We are pro-competition. Then I think we are losing out. So I think we need to be better at acknowledging the problems that gives rise to populism and actually addressing them. And then you have the symbiosis with the media. You creating sort of a downward spiral. And of course, the introduction of the internet and social media has just increased that downward spiral. So we need to discuss how can we use this spiral. Should we do, as Elisa say, and be more provocative on social media, or should we not? And I'm probably one of those who would say that I don't want to be provocative on social media, although I probably am in some issues, but trying to take people seriously. And because the backdraft of this is actually the survival of the political parties, this has been a not 2 decades, but 4 decades trend. In the 60s and 70s, the mainstream political parties used to be catch-all parties, at least in the Nordics, but I think I find this in numbers and studies of European policies or politics in general. The decline of the political parties, they have gone from being catch-all, not only having that you had almost like the Social Democrats and the Conservative parties on each side, but they also had social events. This is where you went to find your future husband or your future wife. They created social spaces for people to talk and meet, and they were more, I think, also representative for the people. So they weren't talking to the people, they were the people. And with the decline of the political parties and their membership, maybe we are facing the fact that we are less representative today. And therefore, we need to use social media, use other mechanics in order to get the feel of what people actually want. But I mean, I'm a politician. I'm a human being too. I can get cancer. My grandmother died 2 years ago, so it's not that we are not part of daily life. We also are a part of the daily life. But trying to be better at communicating and expressing this, and also addressing problems where we feel that this is radical or this is difficult. Just one quick example, and because we want this to be a dialogue, but immigration is a typical topic that creates a lot of debate and controversies. But I think if you want to be the adult in the room, and I think especially the mature parties have a huge responsibility to have an adult debate on migration. I'm a pro-migration myself. I believe in free trade. I believe that people have the right to move. But we also have to acknowledge that this can cause some frictions, and then we have to find the solutions for that. But if we lie and say that, no, migration is just a good for everyone, but people are experiencing that the local communities are changing, their jobs are changing, I think we are creating and giving way for example, the populist right. So we need to be the antidote to that and find better ways of using social media, using communication, using mainstream media to deal with difficult issues as well. So I think I'll stop there and let the conversation move.
Thank you, Hilde. Well, Thibaut, the idea for this event today came out of a meeting we had and you had likely organized in Rome a couple of weeks ago. You're currently preparing a comparative study on European parties, not only people's parties, and also the resilience why they still exist. Well, we have already finished the manuscript. Maybe you can already talk or present some, maybe 3 findings which you think cut a bit across the European party system, and let us see what different political families, for example, try to figure out, or different regions or transport issues. So maybe just a glimpse into the findings we hopefully can present later on a bit more in detail.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you, Peter. Thanks to the Maltese Center for inviting me. And thanks to you, Peter, and to you, Heidi, and to you, Willi Hofmeister, for being authors in the co-authors in the articles of this publication that will be out, we hope, in September. So there would be, the best way to describe it is 2 quotes. One is, "News of my death have been greatly exaggerated." This famous quote by Mark Twain, who was left for dead by, I think it was some British newspaper or American newspaper while he was in Britain, and that was his answer. And the other one is the very famous Winston Churchill phrase about democracy, which you can actually use for political parties. Political parties are the worst form of government, to the exception of every other form of government. And I think this encapsulates this publication, which looks at different regions, different countries: France, the United Kingdom, the Nordic countries, Southern Europe, Germany, the Central Europe, etc., etc. And we have tried different options. The political parties, let's start with this. Political parties are the most unpopular, the least trusted institution in the West. Even in places that have very high levels of trust, like Norway, parties will still be more distrusted than the justice system, than parliament, than the government, etc., etc. And in Norway, I think it's the number goes to 60%, which is not bad. If you go to places like France or Spain, the numbers go more towards 10%. So, which made me one time say that we in political parties have the same popularity ratings as cockroaches, which is probably not a good thing. So we have gone through this period. I think Tommy actually really put a great frame on the subject, because we have lived in the past, let's say the past 15 years, revolutionary times. There were plenty of different things that came together: the economic crisis, the emergence of social media, changing international environment. And if you look in history, whether it's the Reformation, the French and American Revolution, the 1920s and 30s, living revolutionary times, you have all these elements together: major change in communication, a changing political and international politics environment, changing very changing society. All this came together with the 2008 crisis as a catalyst. It's not the crisis itself that changed everything, but it changed. It basically acted as a catalyst to accelerate a lot of changes that were coming. The emergence of the creative class, the emergence of China as a major actor in the end, so-called of the hyperpolar moment, etc., etc. And through this, we have gone through a really revolutionary times in which, and what happens in revolutionary times, everything seems possible and everything needs to change. And people who don't like stuff, they can say, oh, I can get rid of it now. And they thought they could do the same with political party. And so this is why, to take the example of Spain, when you had the Indignados movement in 2011, the title was, if I remember well, it was Real Democracia, Real Democracy Now, which meant direct democracy. That means we don't need political parties. We don't need parliament. All of the populist movements, whether left, right, or center, and I include the center because I include my own president, at least at the time, as a populist, or as having populist tendencies, or having had populist tendencies. Every populist politician has gone through this idea: we don't need political parties. What we need now is direct democracy, and we can do direct democracy, not having to deal with parliament, not having to deal with political parties because of the social media. So hence the idea, for example, in Italy with the Piattaforma Rousseau, which was put in place by the Five Star Movement, to have this sort of platforms, a social media network in which basically the debate would happen, and that would go around political parties, which were seen as corrupt, inefficient, bad, you name it, everything that is bad, you could put that in that column. And the reality is, I mean, we've seen that with the Five Star Movement. After 3 years, people got tired of it. It just didn't work. And it was bringing a lot of problems. I mean, the Piattaforma Rousseau was actually a private company that was owning the data of all the elected members of the Five Star Movement. Real big problems, right, for democracy, etc., etc. If you look in Spain, Podemos, they tried to do something similar. It didn't work. In France, Emmanuel Macron tried several times to do things such as the Dialogue Citoyen, or there were the Grand Débat, for example. When you think about to calm down the yellow vest, did it bring anything to democracy? Anything new? Actually, no. And this is where we are. We are now in a post-revolutionary moment, which means that we are, and here's the title of my next book coming up next year, a post-populist moment. Right, in which populism is just run out of steam. And we're getting back to traditional politics. Incredibly enough, in Italy right now, you have political parties, debates in parliament, and this is where the political debate happens. I was watching the other day the debate between Giorgia Meloni and Elly Schlein, so none of them are members of the EPP, but it was remarkable to see how much, first of all, both of them were leaders of their respective party, and there was no question about this, right? And secondly, that it was no longer insulting each other, the sort of stuff that you hear sometimes in US presidential debate, but they were talking about real things that matter to real people, right? Immigration, emigration, right? To answer the question of the questions of immigration that was brought by the right, the left came up with, well, let's talk about emigration. Why is it that our kids have to go out of Italy in order to get a decent job? And we were talking about, in French, you would say, on parlait enfin de fond. We were talking about real issues. And I think this is also something that Mr. Feijóo said a year ago, I think exactly a year ago, after a drama happening in Spanish politics. People now are tired. They are tired of the show politics. They want politicians to take care of their problems. And how do you do that? Well, the best way to do it is actually to take a step back from the politique spectacle, out of all these sort of big shows of politics, and get back to people talking, politicians talking about people's problems. And the best way to do that is political parties. So in some ways, it is a little bit of, it is depressing to say it, but political parties are resilient and are still there primarily because we've tried something else, and that something else didn't work.
Very well. But it's not only the national level we're going to discuss. Willy and I had the pleasure to write on European political parties, which are still quite a unique beast in a certain way, having no local party organizations. They have no individual membership, so far at least. And they rely, of course, on your parties, on you running around and selling the European idea. And we are ahead of the European elections in 2024 in June. Now it's out. So how can we, and I invite you all three for a short comment, how can we describe the specific challenges of European parties and what can we contribute? And we as Martin Center, of course, I think that we EPP are very keen on to contribute. Lisa, please.
So I think the European elections are the most important because mainly all the politics we are applying in our countries, they come from the European Parliament or the European Commission. So we need to make people understand the power of the European Union. But I think we have here two main problems, which is the lack of culture knowledge of the younger generations, for example, and the woke movement we are experiencing right now in Europe. And I talk about these two because they are both together. Because when we have a lack of culture and knowledge in the younger generations, it's so easy to install, in a way, the woke movement into the younger generations, creating radicalism since you are a very young age. So I think we need to discuss all the countries. Maybe it's not happening the same in every country. It's not happening the same way. But something that I'm really, let's say, profound, and it matters to me a lot. It's that socials are influencing a lot to the younger generations in many radical movements, which is you cannot go for other way, which is the way that the woke culture is imposing into our society. So I think that's something we need to argue, the political parties from the right parties, because we have a lack of roles and, let's say, leaders. Maybe in Europe, we have many people who goes out on media, but we don't have those leaderships we had many years ago. And for example, in Madrid, we have Ayuso, which is right now like our bigger leader in Spain. And she became a leader because she fought constantly the wokeism in Spain. So I think we need to get on that. We need to argue on that. We need to argue why the Socialist Party always wants the people to have less knowledge to direct their lives. So if we can reverse that, if we can make the people more independent, if we can make the knowledge to arrive to every single one, if we can get the wokeism on the other side, we will introduce these generations, the newer generations, to the importance of having the European Union. Not only because the Second World War, because they don't get it, but because it can happen all the time. It's happening right now in Ukraine. And we need to show them that situation. It can happen all over again. And we can have a war, or we can have many problems that if we don't solve together, we are going to have a bigger trouble. So I think we need education, we need culture, and we need to take care of our kids when we have it and be responsible. But that's something that depends on the human being and on the individual's bit. I think we need to work on that.
Heidi, how is the situation in Norway? How is it looked upon, the upcoming events?
Well, here's the problem or challenge for Norway as a non-member of EU, but we are connected in the integrated internal market. I think we have, but still being that, we have some of the same problems as we have seen in populism in other countries, like that was actually behind Brexit. You have national politicians not taking responsible for what national politicians are responsible for. For example, the national healthcare system. You will remember Boris Johnson saying that we will take back the NHS, we'll fund up our national health system. There was nothing with Britain being a member of the European Union that said they weren't allowed to fix their healthcare system. That's actually a national responsibility. But every time national politicians don't take responsibility for national policies, they point at the EU. They blame the EU. So I'm just going to introduce a radical thought. So keep on to your seats. How about honest politicians? I'm just putting it out there. Because we need to have a clearer division of labor between what is actually pan-European problems that needs to be solved on a European level, and have a clearer understanding of that. And I think that also is European politicians' responsibility, and saying that, no, this is not actually on the European level. If this is not fixed in your country, you have to actually take that up with your national politicians. And national politicians, and at least Euro-friendly politicians, also should be clearer on what is a national responsibility contra a European responsibility. And there, I think Martin Center and think tanks in general are the one who can facilitate debates like this and connect the parties on a deeper level, and or maybe on also a higher level that we cannot do through the EPP or through being national parties, some of us not represented in the European Parliament. But I think that it will be interesting if what Thibault is saying is true, that we're moving towards a post-populist future. I hope that is true, because we tried the other way around. It's not working, but I think the populists are still there, and I think the national or the moderate center-left and center-right parties needs to actually work a little bit more together in order to keep not to keep the politics stable, as in we want to be in power, but in order to change and answer and work together to actually keep the democracy alive. And taking responsibility and also putting it where it should be. Because I think when we're trying to blame everyone else, we're losing out, our parties are losing out, we'll lose credibility, and the political democratic system is losing out. We've seen it even before, we don't want to see it again. And I think if it's true that we're moving beyond that, that's really good news, but I don't think it's true for every country. I think we're on different levels right now. But if some countries are going forward, maybe the rest of us can come after.
Before I would like to open the discussion, give you the opportunity to join. Thibault, you worked in the Central and Eastern European countries, and we have not touched upon the specific situation there. Maybe a very short remark on what's, in comparison, for example, to rather established democracies in Spain or Norway, we are going to face there, and a lot of elections are up to.
Okay. So first of all, Peter, I will go against what you said, because Spanish democracy is only 15 years younger than Polish democracy, right? 1975, and Greek democracy. So I think when it comes to Central Eastern Europe, we need to stop seeing them as a bloc, because they're not. I mean, Hungary, Lithuania, right? on Ukraine, on democracy, on Taiwan, on China, on so many things. They are completely opposite. So I think when it comes to Central Europe, which, as you said, in which I lived and in which I've worked and continue to work, I think there are a lot of differences. These are very different individual countries. There are common themes, just like there are between Spain, Italy, and Greece. But we can't treat them as as one region that is uniformly the same. I mean, we didn't talk in the 70s of post-fascist Italy. I think it's time we ditch the post-communist idea of Central and Eastern Europe. So all this to say that it's very different political system, very different political cultures as well. I mean, if you look in Hungary, you have one party that is functioning, and that's unfortunate because that means that this one party can basically control the state. You have the Czech Republic, which has, or Slovakia, which have a very diffuse political systems in which no party is at more than 20%. In Latvia, the main cleavage is about whether you're a Russian speaker or Latvian speaker. In Estonia, which has also a very large Russian-speaking minority, it's been more between populist and centrist. So I think we need to think about these countries individually, and actually, interestingly enough, much more than Southern Europe, where at least politically, in terms of political culture, because of the history of the civil wars and Reds versus blacks, etc. The political divide, the political cleavage is actually almost more similar than in Central and Eastern Europe. So if there is one thing that I would say is that do not treat Central and Eastern Europe as one bloc, but rather as differentiated countries. They will like that as well.
Indeed. Now, ladies and gentlemen, please, for your comments, very short comments, please, or questions, use the microphone because otherwise our guests online cannot participate. Who would like to open the round? Tommy, then. And for the first round, yes, Philip, I take you 3. Tommy, please, go ahead.
Because you mentioned this publication, what we can create now, Cliffhanger, it's IRI, I guess Martin Center is also a partner that creating the publication. So maybe you can give 3 takeaways. So the articles, as I understood, as I read, is about resilience of political parties. So maybe you can give 3 takeaways from that publication already, if you so choose. But maybe you want to take a few questions at the same time. No?
Yes, I will collect them indeed. I got you, I think.
Thank you very much. Tony Gillen from MCC Brussels. Taking on woke is part of our mission. And where I come from in the UK, both Ms. Gonzalez and Ms. Lund talked about the importance of honesty and being direct with people. The question that British politicians are terrified of and can't give an accurate or honest answer to is, what is a woman? That's the question they're absolutely terrified of and will not give an honest answer to. So my question to you is, how did we get here? How is this woke culture playing out in your countries? Are politicians in your countries prepared to answer that question honestly? And just a small other question, if I may, because I think Ms. Gonzalez, you said something really interesting about trusting the population, trusting your electorate, and giving them choice. So I'd like to ask each 3 of you, what choice has been taken away from the electorate that you would give back to them?
Very well. And Philip, the last for the first round.
Thank you. So I wanted to look a little bit about how volunteers act in political parties. So much of political parties is supported by volunteers at the local level, branches, chairs of branches, etc. So how can we make sure that volunteers, the best people, get involved, they engage with most citizens, and indeed that the talented among them are chosen and promoted correctly, as in many cases politicians, parliamentarians do come up through these local ranks. So real focus on the grassroots there. Thank you.
Perfect. Lisa, I give the Vogue issue to you, but very short. I know this is one of your favorite topics.
Yes.
I think
Yes, I
Tony and you
love
can
this.
discuss for hours. But
Absolutely.
keep it very short for the sake of
Yes,
the other
yes, a
participants.
very short one. How's the work culture in Spain? Well, we have a socialist party which is in the national government, which is impulsing the wokeism in all the areas, trans area, what is a woman, what is not. We're questioning science. When you question science, you have many big problems. You know, I like a lot Matt Goodwin. I read him a lot, and he's working so hard on the work culture and the against work culture we need to promote through politics, but also through the citizens. I think that's so important. And a choice from the electorate to give back. It's, for example, the lack of freedom we had during the pandemic, which was awful because we thought that a politician could lock us down at home, impose masks, and many other things. So because of that, we had like a small grief on the democracy system we gave us. So I think it's so important to promote freedom in all aspects of life, even in that harsh situation of the pandemic. But that's something that I think mostly of the governments didn't do well. And for example, in Madrid, we fought against that because we thought that we can impose health, but also impose the theaters, the restaurants altogether. We need to work on that, not imposing, but promoting. I think that's the main cause. Thank you.
Heidi, the issue of trust has been mentioned, also leadership, and you had an interesting career by your own, coming from a corporate culture, for example, where different issues of leadership matters. Remarks on that?
Well, in the Nordics, I think many politicians say that trust is the main asset you have in politics, because it's all about the trust. For example, during the pandemic, if you are imposing rules and regulations that people actually we need them to follow in order to deal with a global deathly pandemic. And I think the Norwegian government at least had a lot of trust in the people, so they were able to say that you had to wear masks. You also you had some areas that was closed down while you can open up others, and people accepted this. And I think that's it makes the political transactions better between government and people. And in order to gain that trust, obviously you will have to. I heard Thibault, you said that the trust in politicians, even in Norway, is at 60%, but the trust in the justice system, in policing, in the government is very high. Well, those are political institutions, so I don't think you can divide so much between the individual politician and the institutions as such, because it is a political choice on how you build on these institutions. And I just want to volunteers creating social arenas, as I said, in order to have people, because politics has to be fun as well, not just campaigning, not just having opinions, but also finding people that you actually care about and you want to work with and for. And last thing, on the taking on woke, I would like to make a comment on that, because one of the reasons why I joined politics is that I am a strong believer in respect for the individual and individual rights. And I think the woke debate, we should have ruled that debate from day one. Because one of my things, even if I define myself as a liberal conservative in the British sense of that, I've always defined myself as a strong feminist, I'm anti-racist, and also a strong supporter of LGBT rights. And if we had been very clear on supporting individuals within these groups, trying to take away the discrimination and saying that individual rights is at the first and foremost of our policies, I don't think the wokeism had existed, and at least we could fight it on true, honest policies. Because I am an anti-racist, I am a feminist, and I do believe in LGBT rights. And I think as a conservative, I should be the main promoter of those issues. And I don't believe in wokeism, but I am afraid of people pushing wokeism in front of them in order to hide some of their real opinions. And I think that deserves an honest debate also amongst conservative parties.
Well, a subject to be follow up. But Thibault, Tommy is curious in first findings, and we promise that we will present this study definitely probably after summer here in Brussels and elsewhere. But maybe you can open a bit the books and
so I mean very quickly then, and then maybe talk about what can be done for political parties to strengthen themselves right after this revolutionary time. Once now that the dust is settled, what can political parties do to be stronger and to be more accepted, I would say. The first one, I think, I'd like to piggyback on what Heidi was talking about. The social aspect of political parties is something that is essential. There are less political party members and volunteers now than there were a long time ago, but the social aspect of political parties has kind of been lost on us. And I think political parties need to think about that, to think of themselves almost, they're almost a club of people. And we won't get back to the times in which, everything from cradle to grave was taken care of by the political family, et cetera, But we can get a more social aspect to politics, and politics is about the affairs of the city. So it is also about society. Secondly, and I think this is probably the most important point, beyond understanding. Beyond that, there is also a better understanding at what political parties are and what they are for. A political party, and this is also why political parties are less trusted than the other institutions, reflects fundamentally the divisions of our society. If I want to get back to the Max Weber definition of political parties, it is exactly that. They represent sections of society and bring their aspirations to the political debate with the purpose of gaining power. Right, so this is the transmission belt between the divisions into our society, specific social groups which tend to try and put their issues and transform them into legislation that is in their favor or corresponds to their vision of society. Which means that whether we like it or not, political parties need to reflect the divisions of our society. Right. We are in these post-populist times. I'm sorry for doing my own marketing, but in these post-populist times, we are getting back to a very strong left-right divide, which we just witnessed. Right. The war on woke. In the United States, we know something about that, right? This shows that there is, and the question here is how do we operate? How do political parties operate by defending the visions of segments of society? Some of them have felt that they have not been heard, and therefore have gone to support very disruptive political parties. How do we make that happen? How do we rebuild coalitions that can be as large as possible, that can be very antinomic to each other while keeping the social peace, right? This is the real mission, if you want, of political parties, and I think there needs to be a better understanding of that among political parties. When I worked for political parties, whether it was the Tories in the UK in the 2000s or whether it was for Nicolas Sarkozy's UMP in the late 2000s and early 2010s, we had this thing that always enraged me. We are the public good. No, you're not. As a political party, you do not represent the public good. You represent the interest of a section of society, and you're trying to put this interest forward in the global arena, and then through compromise and through a fight in the assembly, let's put it like that. But I mean, it's not a physical fight, but a battle of ideas. You win, you lose, you make compromises, but then we get to the general interest. So political parties need to be a bit clearer about that. And right now, in these days in which the left-right and this is more, I mean, this is something really for the EPP, where the left-right divide is coming back. I think it is in the interest, I would say personally, that it is, as someone who is more to the center, I will say it, it is in the EPP's interest to be the party of the middle class and the party of the center-right. Right, and sticking to this, I think, is important. And then finally, and this is one of the findings that we discussed during our meeting, less communication, more contact. Let's I mean, one of the reasons why populist parties came in and became very popular to the point of taking power in many countries is that political parties had lost touch. Because we thought that just by having a big social media network, our own social media network, or by being present on Twitter, we're going to have to be able to better communicate with our constituents. Guess what? This is exactly the contrary that has happened. Because the internet actually has an incredible possibility of putting people in bubbles, but also working only in one direction. And we haven't been very good at that. So going into contact with people, go and meet real people, spend money on that, rather than spend millions sometimes of big communication still needs to be done, right? Communication needs to be done, don't get me wrong. But be very careful as political parties to be back in touch with people. I think it's very important. Just one word, because we haven't answered the question on political party, on the selection of candidates. I will advise you to go and see our previous publication on candidates, on candidate selection in political parties. Yes, I do a bit of marketing as well myself. Candidate selection. I think this is not only a question of grassroots and working with political party members. Yes, getting the volunteers, getting them in a sort of cradle to grave, so to speak, itinerary where the best of them can become candidates is great. But if you want society, if you want political parties, and if you want political party lists to look like society, you also need to open up to civil society. And I think we have very good examples here. Heidi came from civil society and at the same time from political parties. And Elisa is, representative of a new generation of the Spanish center right. And we need to have, different element to select candidates. And we need to think about how we select our candidates, because it is an extremely important issue. Sorry.
Thank you very much. This makes things very easy, because you, to a certain extent, summed up already major findings, or at least opened I have to really close the discussion. We are almost over time. It's too short, but be promised that is a topic which is very much to our heart as the Martin Center, not only in terms of election, but as a think tank of the still largest party family. We are very delighted to continue this discussion with you, with others here in Brussels, but also, of course, on the ground, because yes, getting out of the bubble and going to the ground, to the real people, is something we have to do. I would like to thank, first of all, you all here on the panel. I have to thank also my dear colleagues, Gering, for this wonderful organization. I wish you a pleasant afternoon, to be back. Party politics is only one of the topics we're dealing with, wide range of other topics, and you have seen the publications over there. Thank you very much for your attention. Also, to those who followed us online. Yes, and stay here, still some food around here, and time for networking. Thank you very much.